paint, and a thong. They pose with tourists, expecting gratuities in exchange for the picture. While businesses and city officials cried foul, fearing Times Square was returning to its sleazy old days and sought ways to oust them from the area, civil rights lawyers said nothing doing. The law is on the side of the painted ladies. Here are two reports filed by Monica Morales and Carolyn Costello.
Even city leaders can't avoid them, and that's the problem. On any given day, you can find these topless painted ladies working Times Square for cash. They're so popular, according to published reports, they even have managers that make up to 30% of their tips. Pix 11 News spoke to one of them.
How many ladies are out here every day?
It's different manager, right? Right now, it's 22 girls in Times Square.
22 working 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Move over naked cowboy, these topless ladies seem to be on the rise, and with many of these women wearing only paint and a thong. They charge a few dollars to pose for photos with tourists. Now Mayor Bill de Blasio is cracking down, and he says it's wrong.
We're going to enforce the law to the fullest with any and all agencies. I'm not satisfied that we have used every tool in our arsenal yet. And I don't like the situation in Times Square, and we're going to address it in a very aggressive manner.
And police say there is little they can do to stop it. It is not illegal for women to go topless in New York City, but Times Square has become a major attraction for families, many with young children. And for those visiting the city with children, it can be a bit of a shock.
Now that I know that it's there, because I wouldn't have known if you hadn't stopped me, I'll walk that way.
But kicking out the topless women could be a violation of their First Amendment rights.
That's illegal. We have rights as humans.
So the city is looking for creative ways to move against the bare-breasted panhandlers.
You could argue that those plazas have had some very positive impacts. You could also argue that come with a lot of problems, and a lot of the surrounding business community has certainly cited those problems.
One way that will be considered by a City Hall task force, removing the pedestrian plazas put in by Mayor Bloomberg 6 years ago.
When I heard this today, it was surprising to me. I've been in New York for 20 years, and I love it. I think it's great. It's very European.
But this New Yorker isn't alone in opposing what he sees as a drastic idea. Pedestrian advocates feel the same way. The plaza's creating a safer situation for tourists on foot.
Thanks to Monica Morales and to Carolyn Costello for that report. And I'm glad now to have joining us is Norman Siegel, a civil liberties and civil rights attorney with the firm Siegel, Teitelbaum and Evans. Thanks so much for coming in, Norman.
Thank you, Marvin.
How do you balance here public decency versus legal rights in this case?
Well, I think you first look at the law and you look at the individual behavior of people. If somebody is taking a picture and at the end they say, if you want to give me a tip, that's great. That's, to me, at most, passive panhandling. On the other hand, if the person...
if you want to give me a tip, but it hasn't been exactly going that way.
Well, where I'm going is, well, it's mixed, and you have to wait to see exactly what is being said. If the person says, I demand $20, and you say no, and the person continues to harangue you, that's aggressive panhandling, and that's illegal. But you can't lump everyone together. You can't do a dragnet and bring in everybody. The penal law says you have to have individual behavior. And what's sad about this is it's interesting. In one of the few times, the police department, the lawyers for the police department are getting it right. It's the politicians, the mayor and the governor, that are screwing it up.
How?
Well, because they're pandering, they're not being thoughtful. And, for example, de Blasio now is saying maybe we should get rid of the mall. So that, to me, is an acknowledgement that he and his administration have failed to properly govern. If you create something, and Bloomberg should get credit for this, I agree with the person who said he likes the mall. I go to the mall. There's parts of it that is not very positive, but overall, it's a really positive development. And what are you going to do? You're going to get rid of it because you can't deal with a bunch of ladies who are showing their breasts? Come on, government should be better than this.
Well, in 1992, the highest court in the state ruled that panhandling was legal, and it didn't specify whether it was topless or not.
No, in 1992, in a case called People of Santorelli out of Rochester, what the court said was that women had the same right as men. If the men could take off their shirts, the women could too. And under the indecent exposure law, what the court said is that when the women took off their shirts, it was not lewd and it was not under the statute. That was the majority decision. And as a result of that, the New York Police Department began to say very clearly, we're not going to arrest women if they're topless. Now, the only issue here is whether or not you can develop the facts to show that, in fact, what this is a commercial enterprise.
And that is illegal.
No, what they can do is they can regulate it. The commercial enterprise is not illegal. What they can do is regulate it, and potentially they could say, well, you have to have a license like a vendor. But they'd have to prove to a court that what's going on in Times Square is a commercial activity. I don't think it is. I think what it is at most is panhandling. And the law says if it's passive, it's okay. If it's aggressive, it's not okay.
Now, another thing being considered is perhaps designating that area parkland, and that gives city and state officials the right to regulate and have licensing for vendors, as you were talking about.
Well, you know, and that's the other part. They should check with their lawyers, because most of the cases that come out of the U.S. Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, that establish and protect First Amendment free expression rights, the context is usually in a park. So if they think that by making Times Square a park, they're going to eliminate this problem, they better rethink it, because it's not going to only not eliminate it, it's going to give some of the women and the costume characters even more protection to do expressive activity.
So is there any alternative to all of this? I mean, after
Yeah,
all, come on, Norman, families pass through there and tourists.
Well,
you and I remember the days when the whole area was filled with sex shops and Rudy Giuliani shut them down. And now there's the fear the same sleaziness is going to return.
Right, but I think this is what you do. You make up a flyer and you hand it out to the tourists and to the people who are doing the costume and the painted ladies. And you send in the community affairs people who are very good. And for a week or two, you talk to people and tell them what you can do and what you can't do. And my experience is the overwhelming majority of people will adjust their behavior if you treat them with respect and explain to them what the law allows them to do and what the law doesn't. And then after that period, when the people engage in activity that the law says you can't, you give them a summons. And I think that will change the dynamic. We have serious problems in this city, racism, police activity, where people are complaining, and we're now spending all this time on the issues about women, painted breasts. Come on, where's the leadership and where's the thoughtfulness?
It is a tourist mecca. It's a mecca for tourists.
And
families
people make a
come
lot of
through
money
there.
off that.
But should children and families visiting here have to be exposed to topless women? That's the question.
The courts have said that toplessness per se, nothing more than just topless. Those women can stand there topless forever.
So in other words, you're saying whatever this mayoral task force comes up, whatever proposal, there's still a legal challenge to anything they come up with.
Everything that they've said so far, I think, can be challenged. And the only area I think that they have some wiggle room, to use that pun, is in the context if you can show that it's a commercial activity, they can begin to regulate it. But again, when government starts to come in and using the hammer rather than a thoughtful approach, I think you got a problem.
A complicated issue.
It is complex. It's not as simplistic as the governor and the mayor make it out to be.
Norman Siegel, always a pleasure. Thanks
Same
for
here,
coming in.
Marvin.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
And that'll do it for our program this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website, pix11.com/newscloseup. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.